Well, a group of Conservative former ministers have put forward a plan to give Parliament's control over the Brexit negotiations if the Prime Minister's deal is defeated tomorrow as expected. The proposal could potentially see a select committee made up of senior backbenchers coming up with an alternative which government would be required to implement if approved by MPs in the House of Commons. Well, Conservative MP and Remain supporter Nick Bowles is behind the plan and says it could throw the Prime Minister a lifeline.
Our proposal is to ask the Liaison Committee, which is the committee that brings together the elected chairman of all of the select committees of Parliament, to ask that committee to lead a process of trying to discover what is the compromise that Parliament can support. There is actually the potential for a compromise. Now, aspects of it may be things that the Prime Minister herself doesn't like, but ultimately what we need is a deal that the European Union will accept, that Parliament will vote for, and the Prime Minister at the moment doesn't have that.
Nick Bowles, the author of the so-called Bowles Plan. Well, joining us from West London to discuss this is Professor of Public Administration, Gavin Drewry. Very good to talk to you, Professor Drewry, and it's getting very complicated for people. Let's start with basics here. Just tell us, first of all, what is the function of a select committee?
Basically, the function of select committees is, and long has been, scrutinising the government and producing evidence by way of hearings and evidence sessions to inform debate. One thing that select committees can't do is actually take executive action.
That's up to now. But just tell us then, how long have they been going?
Well, select committees go back almost into the mists of time of parliamentary history. They were certainly very strong in the 19th century, and they've become increasingly so in the last few decades. There was a big refurbishment of the committee system in about 1980, and some important developments since then. So committees are actually quite an important part of the parliamentary landscape.
And they scrutinise the work of government. But as you said in your first answer, they can't, on their own, take executive action.
No. I mean, we're in an interesting situation now. When governments are strong and in command of what's going on in Parliament, then select committees have to sit back and take not exactly a passive role, but they try to exercise influence by the strength of their recommendations and the persuasiveness of their recommendations. But, of course, we're in somewhat unusual times at the moment when government isn't in control. And indeed, when we also have a speaker who appears to be sympathetic to the idea of shifting the balance of influence away from the executive towards the Chamber of Parliament itself. And in those circumstances, committees have the potential, at any rate, to become a little bit more influential, and committee chairmen become quite important players in the outturn of events.
You say a little bit more influential. Then can I put it to you, do you think some of the coverage, some of the newspaper coverage today and over the weekend was getting a bit overexcited, describing it as a potential constitutional coup?
I think that is slightly overstating the likely outturn of events. I mean, particular mention has been made of the Liaison Committee. Now, the Liaison Committee is certainly made up of committee chairs who are very influential figures. But it's a very big committee. It's a very unwieldy committee. It has 36 members, and all those members are defending a little bit of committee territory. And the committee simply isn't designed to do the sort of job that some commentators seem to have been envisaging for it.
But could it be redesigned if there is deadlock exhibited tomorrow over the Prime Minister's deal and the Prime Minister then comes up with no new proposals?
Well, I think whatever happens in the aftermath of the likely outcome of tomorrow's vote, then if Parliament does take back a measure of additional initiative and control, then committee chairs will become key players in this. But I think the liaison committee itself is not the medium through which this will happen. It isn't designed for the purpose. It's too unwieldy, and it really wouldn't function in any credible way, I think, as a committee. But that doesn't mean that there isn't some potential scope. I find it difficult to imagine quite what form that would take, but some potential scope for committee chairs to get together and take a lead in designing some new constitutional initiative. And who knows where that might lead.
Or potentially the formation of a cross-party grand committee to look solely at Brexit. Could something like that happen? Could it work? Sorry, Professor Drewry, I think the sirens behind me might have blocked out that question. Is there any potential for a new committee to be formed? Well, it wasn't the siren. We seem to have lost communications, as you can see, with Professor Drewry. We thank him for his expertise and analysis, Gavin Drewry there.